Hi everyone, welcome to hibs.podd episode 6, our first episode of 2022. It's a new year, but it's the same old us. Thanks for coming back to join us. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stu. How you doing, Stu?
Okay. Anybody that reads the forum might know that I've recently tested positive for COVID, so just getting over that. But yeah, fine. Absolutely good to go, and looking forward to this tonight.
Who hasn't at this stage?
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Speaking of people who've tested positive for COVID, a slight spoiler there, but we're delighted to be joined by Hibernian's first ever black player, something he's very proud of, Kevin Harper. We'll be the first to admit that this is a little bit of an unknown for us because for me, Kevin was playing for Hibs just before I was born and when I was a baby. For you, Stuart, you've kind of got these sort of infant or childhood memories of Kevin.
Yeah, it's actually quite. It's probably the most starstruck I'm going to be because Kevin was around Hibs when I was sort of between about maybe 7 through about sort of 10, 11-year-old. And that's when I think you still believe footballers are kind of superheroes and a bit infallible. I think when you speak to modern players, you kind of know they're human beings, whereas with Kevin, I've still got this image of him as being some kind of superhero. So yeah, looking forward to it, but a bit nervous.
Absolutely. Well, we always get questions from the fans on the forum, and they're always really helpful. And, if not directly inspiring a question, definitely helping us sort of guide the overall conversation of the topic. But for this one, we've had to lean heavily on that because of the fact that we don't have too much first-hand experience, and as Stuart's just said there, he thinks Kevin Harper is some kind of Superman, so we're not the most reliable sources, but neither is Wikipedia, as we're soon to find out. But before we go into that, which will be very soon, we just want to touch on the usual points for us about the forum. Do the prediction league. I don't think I need to say more than that at this stage. We've definitely advertised it. If you haven't started yet, you're probably goosed, but for those that are still involved, it looks like it's hotting up. I know, Stuart, you wanted to talk about the buses. It was very much your baby.
Yeah, we obviously we're on buses to sort of semi-finals and finals, and the semi-final was a great day out on the buses. Final was a bit a bit chop and change as we got confirmation the club would still take us. Then at the very last minute they done a sort of 180, and I totally understand why. They had to protect their staff in the lead up to Christmas, didn't want anyone isolating. But I just kind of wanted to thank everyone that travelled. Obviously, I didn't travel in the end because of my positive COVID test. So I had to kind of rope people in to look after the bus at the last minute. They said everyone was great. Everyone was really understanding about the situation. So yeah, just kind of almost a word of thanks to anyone that travelled to say, thanks very much for being so understanding about the late last minute issues we had and for behaving basically. Because I heard from a few sources that there was one or two buses that had a few issues, shall we say, with people not being able to go into pubs. So enjoying some festivities on the buses, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cup final. I think we can forgive some. Anyway, I won't go into that. Yeah, in terms of the forum, there's not loads to advertise because as of this point, the winter break has been brought forward and we don't have too much football to look forward to. But of course, we are about to enter into January. The transfer windows are always pretty active for us, and we'll certainly be banging that drum on social media as well. It's something. It's a little bit of a taste, and we're sure Hibs will be active this transfer window. So do get involved in the threads there, especially if you know something.
Yeah, absolutely. In the know status is there to be had for anyone that wants it.
Cool. And with no further ado, I think on that point we'll lead into the interview with Hibernian's first black footballer, the first black manager in Scottish football for over 15 years, Kevin Harper. Thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us on hibs.podd. We're delighted to sit down and speak with you. Firstly, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Good. Getting ready for the Christmas period. A bit gutted that this is going out and we can't go and watch football games. Well, we can if you're lucky 500. But I think we're at that point where football's really important to us all. But other than that, things are going well. Looking forward to Christmas, spending a good bit of time with the family.
Glad to hear that. It's interesting you touch upon football, the role it plays for all of us. We're kind of interested to start really in talking about what football means for you now. We know you've got your academy that you're trying to grow at the moment, and we show you're sort of involved in other ways. Can you talk us, a little bit about what your career in football looks like at the moment?
At the moment, I've got a sports management company, an academy, and I do a lot of one-to-one stuff and group coaching sessions for different teams. different amateur teams and junior teams. So pretty hands-on, pretty busy. But at the end of the day, football has been my life for so long, which, it's hard to step away from it. But, I enjoy it. I enjoy helping kids become better players and better people as well, most importantly. I always think that football is a great opportunity for kids to do really well, but I think it's also about making them good people, trying to make them good people as well. As a coach, it should never be about the coach. It should be always about the player.
You've certainly touched upon it there. If you were to divulge a little bit more about your ethos as a youth coach, if you like, and your philosophy towards coaching young footballers, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think for me, it's about trying to get the best out of kids, and helping them become the best that they can be. So for me, it's about making sure they understand the basics, they can do the basics. I feel just now that there's a lot of things in football that kids can't do and don't understand, and I think we're very orientated of coaching rather than maybe letting them learn themselves by making mistakes, and rectifying and helping them to understand, and you understand, trying to get into their head and why they're doing their things or why they've done that, because I think for me, and that goes back to me a long way to actually, I just came through at Hibs and I was playing in the reserves, and I made a run. I was playing against Richard Gough, and he said, "Kevin, why are you making that run?" And I said, I explained why, and he says, "I'm never ever going to get out there." So for me, it's about trying to give my experience, the experience that I've gained throughout my many years in football, working under some of the best managers and working under some of the best players that the world has seen, and pushing that on and helping kids develop and try and be the best that they possibly can be. Not every kid is going to make it. Every kid has a dream of making it. If I can make them better as a footballer, then that's my job done. But I think also I've got a duty of care to make sure that they're better people as well. I think that's the duty of care that I have, so that when and if they leave my coaching, my academy, then they can look back and say, you know what, he done the best that he could for me.
You touched on it a wee bit there, Kevin, where you said, about your own time coming through at Hibs. Could you talk to us a wee bit more about your own sort of youth football experience, both at boys' club level and basically how you ended up signing for Hibs?
Yeah, well, I was. Goes back to. I may as well go back to the start. I was out playing football with my mate in the street, and he said, "Oh, I need to go," and I said, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Oh, I'm going to football coaching. I'm going to football." And I was like, "All right, what am I meant to do?" And he says, "I don't know." as you go as a 10-year-old, I don't know. So I says, "Can I come with you?" And he says, "Well, if it's okay with your mum." Went up and asked my mum, and she said, "Yeah." So we trudged from Portsmouth Park right to the back end of Sighthill, which is probably about a mile and a bit, as 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and started playing with a team called Celtic North. Was there for about a year in the old red ash pitches. I don't know if some of the listeners will understand or be old enough about the red ash pitches and the black ash pitches. They just see astro and grass now, so that shows you how old I am. And then went to a team called West Park, who I think for me is grown up with a single parent. My dad wasn't about. He was an alcoholic. And the two coaches that I had there, Billy Harvey and Bert Rown, who unfortunately are no longer with us, were really, really important in my development as a player and a person. And I think a lot of what I try to put over to the kids is lived experience of how it can go well and how it can go wrong. And then when I was at West Park, I was playing in a tournament in Paisley. And Alec Miller was there watching his son, and there was a commotion on the other pitch, and I was doing really, really well, running the show, so to speak, and he turned around and watched me, and then he asked me if I wanted to sign. Well, he got in touch with my boys' club. I was training with Hearts, I was training with Hibs, I was training with Dundee United, Tottenham, And I decided, he came up to my house, spoke to my mum with myself, and just I felt that it was a good fit for me. It was a good fit. I enjoyed the Hibs training when we trained. We trained under Martin Ferguson. He was a youth manager at that point, so in Hamilton. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the vibe as well. I felt that it was a good fit, and then I decided to sign. Alec Miller, as I say, was in my house. He went back down, and his car had been broken in, and his stereo had been took. So when that happened, I thought, oh, he's not going to sign me. But thankfully, he probably had enough cash to fix it, get the window fixed, and get a new stereo. So I was happy to sign.
I think obviously the experience there is quite different from what a lot of young lads go through today, where they're sort of, within these sort of academy setups, as young as 9-10-year-olds sometimes now.
Yeah.
Do you think the way you sort of came into the game was better? Do you think it's an improved system now, or do you think there's a balance to be struck between the two?
I think the difficult thing is now kids don't really go out in the street and play. I was from a scheme, a very very poor area in Glasgow. So the only thing that we could do was go out and play football or run about. That was our probably getaway from the hardships that our parents were probably going through. A lot of our parents, there wasn't many cars there. So I think for me we've lost a little bit of that. You see so many no ball games signs all over the place, and I think it's a different world. It's probably a different world now. There's a lot probably more bad people out there as such, so parents are always scared to, let their kids go and wander the streets, because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know whether they're going to get into trouble, into fights, they're going to get took away, so I don't think you had that in a scheme. Everybody sort of looked out for each other, so it was a wee bit easier then. I think it's great that what we're trying to do with kids just now, but I think the biggest issue for me is the kids are always more often than not on AstroTurf, where the ball, you don't get the bobbles, you don't get the foot sliding away from you in grass pitches, red ash pitches, etc., as you did back then. So I think we miss a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, where we are in the world and where we are in football is where we are. And that's do I think my era was better? I don't know. I think you can look at it. I don't think you can class eras, because there's so many different things that you have to put into place. You think about even the era before me. The pitches were horrific. Some of the pitches I played on were fantastic. I think at Easter Road. I think at Celtic, Rangers. Even at Tynecastle. These pitches were really really good. Aberdeen. So these pitches were good, but you think about maybe 5 years before me, 10 years, where mud was up to your ankles. Nowadays pitches are even better. Some people complain that they're too hard. So I think it's very, very difficult. But I think by the looks of things, if you look at the Scotland setup, things seem to be getting better. Whether that's down to better coaches, having to have badges, I'm not 100% sure on that. But ultimately, I think as a nation, we're probably in a better position than what we were maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, so in terms of some of the kind of social issues that you talked about, football being a kind of remedy for lots of kids, particularly from schemes, as you would put it, where do you see now that being sort of addressed, particularly with the work that you're doing? What are some of the things that you're proud of, and some of the areas that you think you've helped in your time doing the coaching? I
think probably the areas that I have helped in is making kids understand that you can come. It's a difficult industry to be in. It's difficult to become a footballer. Lots of people don't get that. I've been privileged that I played in the Premiership in England, the Premiership in Scotland, and played in Europe. So for me, I'm privileged. I'm privileged to look back and say that I done that. It was a hard slog. But it is a hard slog, and I don't think kids and people realise how difficult it is. They go and they see players on your 20 grand, your 30 grand, your 100 grand a week. You see them jetting off in private jets and having the best cars. And, I think the people, you look at the two probably the best players in the world. You look at Messi and you look at Ronaldo, and you see them jetting off here, there, and everywhere. But what you don't see is you don't see the dedication and what they do behind the scenes. How they live their life and how footballers live their life. It's okay now. I can go down the local pub and go and sit and get pissed for a day. Don't get me wrong. I'll probably come home and have no house because my missus will lock and change the doors. But it's very different now. It's very regimented now. It's very different from when I played. And the pressures are different now. We could walk down the street, and have no cameras. Whereas anything that you do, there's always somebody with a camera now. And somebody's always willing to put it on social media. They're always willing to say something. So for me, it's about trying to help kids understand that they have to be dedicated. They 2 hours that they do with their boys' club isn't enough to get you to become a professional footballer.
I think you touched on it sort of a bit about your background, and you've obviously had quite a tough upbringing. When you sort of made your debut in the first team, you went into a team, with a lot of experienced heads in there. You had guys like Gordon Hunter, Pat McGinley, who'd been around the block with Hibs. Yeah. How intimidating did you find that, and how much do you think your own background shaped that? You always came across as a really confident young player. Did you have a sort of was it a determination that to prove you belonged?
I think for me it stemmed before I was in the first team. There was a lot of hype round about me coming in, for reasons that are unbeknown to me. I was quick, I was powerful, but I didn't have the best skill in the world. I worked hard, and I think it came when Alec Miller shouted me over, from being in the reserves and going into the first team training, and thinking my legs were going to buckle under me as I ran across, and then the standard being higher. And I think probably the first thing I done was I tackled, I think it was Graham Mitchell, went in a slide tackle with Graham Mitchell, and he wasn't too happy, put it that way. And I think the rest of that training session, I think I get booted everywhere. Anytime we played the game, anytime I was near anybody and the ball came, I get put my backside, so to speak. So I think for me I think I gained respect from the players then. That wait a wee minute, this wee guy is not scared, and I think that's probably because of my upbringing. Because when I was playing, as a young kid for West Park, I was getting racially abused every single game for the whole time with parents and people round the side of the pitch. So you eventually get a chip on your shoulder through that because you have to have broad shoulders, and I think for me that's what it was about. It was, I'm going to prove that being a black kid isn't going to hold me back. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that, has drove me forward to what I'm doing just now as well.
You've obviously mentioned the racism issue there, and we are going to come back to that. I'm not wanting you to think that we're trying to gloss over it at all. It is sort of a big part of where we want to go. But somebody you've mentioned 3 or 4 times now is Alec Miller, the often much maligned Alec Miller. What's your thoughts on Alec as a manager? I think one of the things I always remember was he had this reputation as being sort of quite a dour manager, quite a negative manager, and obviously as someone like yourself who was sort of quite a flair player, if you like, did you ever find he tried to curtail you, or did you have a lot of time for him?
No, I thought for me, Alec Miller's probably one of the best managers I've worked under, and I say that, and I've got the utmost respect for Alec Miller and what he done for me and what he done in the game as well. I get that a lot of people think, and a lot of Hibs fans think he was negative, but I think when you actually look at our team, when I broke in the team was probably Willie Miller, Gordon Hunter, Tommy McIntyre, Graham Mitchell, and then you had Mickey Weir, you had Kevin McAllister, you had Pat McGinley, Brian Hamilton, you had Keith Wright up top, you had Darren Jackson, you had myself, you had Michael Michael O'Neill, and that's me missing Joe Tortolano, excuse me, Tony Rougier as well. I'm missing loads. I'm probably missing loads, but when you think about that team, that's a pretty attacking team. There's only probably Brian Hamilton that's defensive in that whole front, that attacking side. So I think when you look at it, it's probably not the team that any Hibs fan looks back and goes, by the way, that was a really attacking team. It's one of the teams that just gets sort of glossed over. And I think a lot of players, a lot of people go, Keith Wright was, there was certain people in that team that people remember, if that makes sense. But as a team, they probably don't remember at all. They probably remember, Alec Miller being a negative, feeling that Alec Miller was a negative manager. But when you think about it, he wasn't. I don't think he was everybody's cup of tea, put it that way. But for me, as a young kid breaking into the team, I learned so much about him, and as I say, I've got the utmost respect for him, and I still call him Gaffer to this day, our boss. So for me, that's where he is, and I think it just shows what he went on to do after he left Hibs.
I think one of the things that obviously kind of got held against Alec for quite a long time was the fact you probably walked into a team that had an absolutely horrific derby record. One of the things I've seen quite recently was there's a Twitter page, the Hibs are here, and it shows sort of old pictures of Hibs in the 90s, and it's from the game where Gordon Hunter ended the hoodoo, if you like, and it's yourself celebrating in the background, and you look like a little schoolboy. You've got the strip that's about 3 sizes too big. You're just like the happiest little schoolboy in the world. What's your memories of that game, and more generally the derbies against Hearts?
That was my very first game. That was my very first ever derby. That game, and I remember going into Tynecastle and sitting down in the changing room and looking around the changing room and thinking, because the noise that was coming from, the fact that we hadn't won for so long, you could see the trepidation in the players' faces, the older players. But I was 18 at the time, and not a care in the world, and going, you know what, it's only another game. It's only another game, because I wasn't in the cauldron of it. I stayed in Glasgow, so I was away from it, if that makes sense. So I didn't see and I didn't hear as much as what the guys that lived in Edinburgh would, or had been part of that longevity of not winning against Hearts. So for me, it was just another game, and you knew what it meant to win the derby, and you always do against your local rivals, especially your city rivals. So I think for me, when that goal went in, it was just sheer delight. I think everybody, the fans, the players, was just, it almost felt as if there was a huge weight off our shoulders, and we ended up hanging on. And believe it or not, I think my first 3 derbies I was undefeated. So I remember that, and I remember scoring goals against Hearts, and I think probably saved my best performances against Celtic, Rangers and Hearts, where it really mattered, I think, when I look back on it. But I think for me, scoring against your local rivals and winning is, something that it lives in the memory. It lives in the memory of both you and, a lot of fans, especially at that time. And the fact that, I scored the winner again, later on when Hearts were going for the title, and it almost pretty much burst their bubble, is a bit sweet as well.
I think obviously that game was one I was going to come to, so you've led me to it quite nicely. That was a huge high pressure game for Hibs, because obviously, as you say, Hearts were real live contenders that year, and we pretty much ended their sort of time as that. Obviously, for us, it proved not to be quite enough. But how high pressure was that game, and how much pressure just in general was on the players coming towards the end of that season? It must have been a really difficult environment to play in.
I think it was difficult. It was difficult. I'd be telling lies if I was saying that it wasn't difficult. But ultimately we put ourselves there. I think looking back on it, obviously Jim Duffy was in at the time, and I think he probably sold a lot of the experienced players probably too quickly, if that makes sense. And the players that came in done fantastically well. And then we got a lot of injuries, and the players that came in, where that experience was, there wasn't that experience to just maybe push us over the line, or just get the odd result that we needed. Because when you look at it, we were in absolute freefall, from the turn of the year. And that was really difficult as well. And there was just a bitter taste, even when you were going out at Easter Road, the think the Hibs fans are like it, like most, but I think when you're working hard and they can see that you're working hard, they get right behind you. But I think also when it's difficult times and they're not happy with the club, it can be a really, really difficult environment to play in, And I think most Hibs would agree, most Hibs fans would agree with that. But at the end of the day, ultimately, we as players should be able to handle that. And I don't think that's where I'm saying about the experience that we had in there. I don't think we had the experience that was able to handle that, unfortunately.
There's quite a few questions. I think there's enough time has passed to maybe talk about you leaving the club now. So there was a lot of questions about sort of how that came around, how difficult a decision that was for you. I don't think anybody can begrudge a player a move down south, but how did that kind of come about, and how much of it was really down to the kind of pressures and the difficulty sort of at the club at the time?
No, I think it was not. I wanted to stay at the club. And I've said this before. I was really, really disappointed that Alec Miller had said to me at the beginning of the season, just at the close season, that he'd spoken to my agent and my agent had said that I wanted to move, which was total bullshit, because I hadn't spoken to my agent. I hadn't engineered any move, and I was really, really disappointed the way it happened so quickly. It happened within a week. I remember coming on as a sub against Clydebank, and then I think we were meant to play Dundee United. We were playing Dundee United in the cup in the midweek, and Derby had come in and asked me to go down and trial, and the manager had phoned me and said, "Listen, Derby have wanted you to go on a trial," and I said, "Right, okay," and went down, and then I think that was on the Tuesday. The trial was on the Tuesday. I came back up, and I was away by the Friday, and when I look back on it, I was really, really pissed off, if I'm honest, leaving, because I didn't want it. First and foremost, I didn't want to leave. I didn't ask for a move. I didn't, I wanted to stay and help us get back up to the Premier League. But as I got older, and I probably looked at it in, the cold light of day, I think Alec McLeish wanted to sell me to get money to rebuild the club or rebuild the team, because I think at that time I was probably the only asset that the club had that could bring in relative sum of money that he could go and spend to bring better players in to get us promoted back up to the Premier League. So, in that sense, further down the line, I understood why he wanted rid of me. He wanted to sell me, but still to this day, it still hurts that, and I've said this many, many times, that I didn't get the chance to just say, you know what, thanks very much to the fans for supporting me, believing in me. I had been there for 6 years. I came through the youth, became the first black player ever to play for Hibs. And that disappointed me, although I only found that out that I was the first black player to play for Hibs about 2 years ago. So for me, the whole move is a real bittersweet for me. It was fantastic that I was moving to the Premiership, but it was a real disappointment that I was leaving a club that I had so much joy and so much pleasure playing in, and had sort of shaped the person that, the player that I was.
It's interesting to hear you say that, Kevin, but I have to say, scoring a goal against Liverpool or away game at Clydebank, I think I know what I'd be thinking.
No, that's the thing. But at the time, it was because it wasn't engineered. That never came from me, and that was the fact that I was just sort of. It was almost that I was there and then I was gone. I think it was more a personal thing that, I didn't get the chance to say thank you very much to the fans that had supported me through thick and thin, through injury, through, the joys of scoring against Hearts, to the disappointment of getting relegated.
We'll certainly come back round to your time at Hibs and time in Scotland, but we'd be remiss not to talk a little bit about your time in England. We'll certainly touch upon it, because it was an incredibly successful time, and we know from experience that it's not always the case that a player can go down and really pave their way in England and make as many appearances, certainly as you did, at a very high level.
Yeah.
Very recently, I travelled from Norwich to Portsmouth, and when I mentioned your name to both sets of local fans, although it was only 3 months you spent in Norwich, There's a lot of positivity, and particularly in Portsmouth. I mean, you're kind of regarded as a sort of cult hero down there. What do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I think it's the Portsmouth story is really, really funny and really strange in a way, because when I was at Derby, obviously I wasn't playing, and I had been out on loan at Walsall, and then Portsmouth had came in for me, and I went down and spoke to Milan Mandrić and Tony Pulis, and they both sold the club to me. I had never experienced Portsmouth. I'd probably not even heard of them, if that makes sense. In the sense of, I was just in my bubble at Derby. I was in the Premier League, and then I went and spoke to Tony Pulis. I liked what he had said. I liked how Milan was talking about what the team was, what he was trying to do at the club and stuff, and they really sold it to me. And then I went and I went down and signed, and the first 2 weeks, I think I signed in February. In the first 2 weeks, I was in shorts and t-shirts, and I was like, here we go, this is brilliant, sunshine, no rain, thinking about Scotland in February time. It's sleet, it's snow, it's horrible. Those palm trees in Portsmouth, and I was like, this is brilliant. And then it was one of Tony Pulis's running sessions on a Tuesday that we always done. We never saw a ball on a Tuesday, and I thought, holy crap, what have I let myself in for here? But the Portsmouth for me is such an amazing club. The fans are really, really top draw. For such a small 20,000 seater, 20,000 stadium, they made noise from minute 1 to minute 90, whatever. But I had my tough times there as well. Even at the season before, 2 seasons before we won the league, we stayed up on the last day of the season. Fans were really, really difficult with us. We were getting slaughtered as we rightly should have. A team of Portsmouth calibre should never be at the bottom of the Championship. With the players that we had, and then 2 years later, we get promoted to the Premier League, and the first half of the season, the fans were booing anytime my name was getting mentioned. The team sheet was getting read out, and Kevin Harper, all I heard was boos. And then the second half of the season, they were chanting my name by the end of the season. And that was, I had played that season, the Championship's winning season, with a double hernia. Played right wing back. Matty Taylor Steve Stone got injured, played right wing back, and then Matty Taylor get injured, and I played left wing back the second half of the season. So it was fantastic, and that's probably why I've got that cult hero status, because I think people knew what I gave. I gave 100%. No matter what, I always wanted to play. I was never the best, most skillful player, the best player in that team. But what I lost in skill, and I gave in attitude and determination and blood, sweat and tears, for that jersey, and for every jersey that I've ever played in.
I didn't actually realise when I looked at the Portsmouth squad that you played in, some of the calibre of players that was there. I seen guys like Paul Merson, Yakubu, like Shaka Hislop. I mean, that was some team you were playing in.
Yeah, it was great. Gianluca Festa was there, Ariane Dezu, Lindboy Primus, Matt Taylor, Steve Stone was there, Mercer, as you say, Jakubu, Tim Sherwood was in as well, Nigel Quasi was there. So we had Todorov as well was there. So there was a good calibre of players, and I always remember when Harry came in that season, he only kept myself, Gary O'Neill, Lindboy Primus, and Nigel Quasi. Mark Burchell was there for a bit, and then he left. But I always remember being on holiday and seeing the players that we were signing and thinking, how am I getting in this team? That was my thought close season, and I thought I need to do something different from what I'm doing. So I made sure I was the fittest I could be. I was in the best shape of my career. Anytime that I wanted to go and maybe work on my fitness, then I would go and mark Steve Stone in games, because him or Matty Taylor just were absolute running machines. If I wanted to learn a bit of defending, I would go and try and mark Paul Merson, because he would drag you here, there and everywhere. if I wanted to do, or I would mark Yakubu because he was lightning quick. He was so strong. And if I wanted to do a wee bit of attacking work, then I would go and, work with Ariane Dezu. He would be the defender. I'd go and stand up with Limboy Primus or Gianluca, whoever was there, Hayden Fox as well. So, I changed my thought process. And the first two games it didn't work. I wasn't even in the squad. So I was like, oh yeah, brilliant. And then, as I say, I got lucky. Steve Stone got injured, and he was out for half the season. Played right wing back then, and then he came back. He was coming back. Matt Taylor got injured, and he was out for the rest of the season. And I played. He was out the second half of the season, and I played left wing back. So I was fortunate enough that I think I played probably I was one of the most not capped, but appearances that season.
It's funny you should mention caps there, because we were going to come on to that. As you made a fair few appearances for Scotland under 21s. You got a call up into the Scotland squad during your time down south by Bertie Votes, but you never ever got a cap. You never made it off the bench. Is that something that disappointed you? Did you think you deserved a cap?
I think it really disappoints me. I think that's the one thing that in football it does disappoint me, that I never got to play for my the national team. I think I deserved a cap. I think when you're playing week in, week out at the top, a team top of the championship, and all due respect, there's people playing 15 games in the Premier League in Scotland. I think there's a big discrepancy there. I think, if I'm honest, I don't think they thought the championship was that good a league then. But I think when you look at the calibre of players that were in it, I think I certainly, for what I'd done, I think for where I was playing week in, week out, and I was doing well, I think I certainly deserved a cap. And when I was in the squad, some of the players when I was training, coming up and saying, Kevin, I can't believe you're not in the team. Your performances in training have been superb. But at the end of the day, that is football. I'm well aware of that. But it is a disappointment that I didn't get a cap when I look at some of the players that did get caps.
Well, you've certainly gone a lot further than either of us, so you can be proud of that. So now we're going to bring back Quickfire 5, a very popular segment. I've completely made that up. We've had no feedback whatsoever, but we're gonna push on nonetheless. So 5 questions for you, Kevin. A lot less serious than the ones we've already asked. First up, what do you want for Christmas?
A pair of gloves for coaching, so it keeps my hands warm.
Easy to please. So other than yourself, if you could place a former Hibs teammate in the current team, who would it be and why?
Ooh, Mike O'Neill. I think he had that guile and determination. I would probably say Gordon Hunter, but 2 centre-halves do well.
So if you could have played under any other Hibs manager, either past or present, that you didn't play under, who would you choose?
Alan Stubbs. Because I would have won a Scottish Cup.
I didn't think about that. It's actually quite an easy choice in the end. How do you think you'd have got on with Stubbsy from what you've seen?
I think I would have got on well with him. I was in a little bit when he was the manager, but I don't care. I don't care really who the manager was. If I could have got to lift the Scottish Cup with Hibs, then I would have been delighted. I think we got to the semi of the League Cup maybe. I don't think we got very far with the Scottish Cup.
Which actor would play you in a movie about your life?
Denzel Washington.
Right, that. Do you reckon he can kick a ball?
He would learn. Well, if he could kick the ball over the bar, then he would be fine.
If football hadn't worked out for you, which career path would Kevin Harper have followed?
There'd been a few actually. Probably a pilot, a lawyer, or something to do with physics.
Oh, hybrid.
Yeah, exactly. Aiming high always. Good to hear.
I think you've actually covered quite a few parts of this already, Kevin, where you spoke about sort of being the racial abuse you got as a young player, growing up. I can't imagine growing up as being sort of like a black kid and a Catholic kid in Postle Park or anywhere in Glasgow was necessarily conductive to people being overly friendly to you. Obviously, there was Ricky Hill before you, who didn't actually make a first team appearance or tries, but you have spoke about being the first black Hibs player. I think it's something that you're both kind of a bit shocked by, but also very proud of.
Yeah, I'm really, really proud of it. I think for me, it's a great honour to be the first of anything. You know, as I say, the biggest disappointment for me was that I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware that until someone, believe it or not, on Twitter had mentioned and said to me. So I had to check. I had to check the record books, and I did see that. You know, I know Ricky had came over and he didn't play in the first team. I think he played in a reserve game, maybe. I think, you know, so for me, being a black kid from Portsmouth Park, you know, to be the first ever to play for Hibs, and I think the fact that I came through the ranks as well makes it even more special for me.
I think I'm going to be quite wary about how I word this one, so forgive me, but there's one experience in your career that I think everyone refers to time in a game when we're sort of pointing out sort of overt racism in the game. I remember being at the game, and I remember the fans were giving you a bit of grief, and I remember the reaction of yourself and another player who was nearby when it happened. And I think I was only 10 or 11 at the time, and even then I was like, something happened there. You can just tell by the way somebody reacts. Something. You obviously came out and told your story in the press, and it got reported to the SFA, and you know, nothing was done basically. Yeah. Do you feel, obviously you'll feel very let down by the football authorities, but did you feel a bit let down that Hibs didn't speak up more on your behalf as well?
Yeah. I think, you know, for me, that incident was real shock to me. It was real shock because I'd experienced it as a kid, you know, every weekend. But, you know, for me, I thought it would have been different in it being a professional. I didn't think I would have got it as bad. And, you know, for the captain to do that, you know, the Hearts captain to do that, Scotland International to do it, you know, was surreal for me when I look back on it. And, you know, I didn't really say anything. It gets shown. I remember it gets shown in Sports Scene, I think it was. Sports Scene or Scott Sport at the time. I can't remember one of the two. And I remember the panel saying nothing about it, and me sitting watching it thinking, wow, they've not even mentioned that. They've not even done anything. And I look back on it and I think, you know, one of my heroes growing up is Mark Walters. And the abuse that he got, you know, with the bananas getting thrown in the pitch and everything, you know, the way he dealt with it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And I think for me, you know, when that happened, I was really, when I went home and the few days I digested what had happened, I was really, really disappointed with myself for not making a bigger stand, you know, and that was just a paper contacted me, Scotland and Sunday contacted me and said, we saw what happened, do you want to speak about it? And I thought, you know what, yeah, I'm going to speak about it because nobody else has spoke about it. And I talk, everybody brings this up, you know, and rightly so, because I was 17, 18 at the time, you know, just trying to make my way in the game. And I thought that if I spoke out about it, then it would harm my chances of getting in the Hibs team and making my way in football. And I vowed in that day when I went home and the days after it and reflected, I vowed that I would never stay silent on racism or equality again. And I've actually had people within the game say to me, Kevin, if you don't stop speaking about racism, you're never going to get back in. And for me, people in the game actually saying that tells me a lot of where Scottish football is regarding racism.
You've definitely touched upon it there, and it's it's harrowing to hear about. But the fact that, you know, we can look at this incident from decades ago at this point and say, well, we're actually not at a point where we can say we've improved enough. You know, your experience as a player, a young player, as you've mentioned, is one thing. You've also experienced time as a manager in Scottish football. You know, how was that experience for you? You know, where did you find that, you know, your position as the first black manager in 15 years sort of made your experience different? And as you said, there's figures in Scottish football that have kind of discouraged you from speaking out. I mean, how does that impact a black manager that wants to, or a black coach that wants to pave their way in the game?
I think for me, if it wasn't for my wife and my kids, I wouldn't have pursued and I wouldn't pursue getting back into the game or getting into the game initially before I got the Albion Rovers job. And I think it's been well documented that, you know, the amount of CVs that I sent, etc., and, you know, I got one interview, and my one interview was with Albion Rovers, and I got the job. And I probably got the job because there wasn't many great candidates available, and they thought, well, you know what, he came across the best, you know, and that's, for me, is all I ever want, you know, and all I'll ever ask of anybody in football if they're interviewing a black, white, ethnic minority person for a job, is they don't look at skin colour. They just give an honest opinion and an equal position. You know, for me, Kevin Harper wants an equal shot at getting a job, not because he's black, because I've got a good CV, you know, and I deserve an interview. You know, I've seen so many people with less qualifications, less experience than myself get jobs that I've been in for and not even got a reply for. And that happens in everyday life. I get that. I understand that. And, you know, but ultimately, when any walk of life, if it takes 15 years for a black man or a black woman to get in any walk of life, there would be outcry in any other area of world. If it's politics, you know, education, you know, just in, you know, a shop, there would be outcry. But for some reason, it's acceptable in football. And I was the first black manager in 15 years. But when you think there hadn't been a black manager in the Premier League until Alex Dyer took over for 17 years. For 17 years in the top flight. And even now, there's more managers in Scottish football that have been called out on racism than there is black or ethnic coaches or managers in the game.
I think it's an interesting point you've made, Kevin. I was looking through just a list of sort of black players that played for Scotland, and in recent times there was obviously Nigel Causey, who you've mentioned, who I think actually got a cap not long after you'd been in squad. Yeah. More recently there's been Shea Adams, and recently Jacob Brown as well, guys who are mixed race black players. You know, one of the things that the sort of key thing they've all got in common is they're all sort of the ancestry route, if you like. They're all English guys who've got Scottish parents or grandparents or whatever. You know, so we're struggling to get sort of young black players who are Scottish born and bred, if you like, through into the game. And not long after Steve Clarke became Scotland manager, I remember him giving an interview. It was around the time there'd been another incident, and he was asked, I think it was actually you'd been speaking at the time as well, about the lack of black managers in Scottish football. And he said that what he found, even in England, where, you know, there is a far greater number of black players of English heritage down there. And he said that the problem was when he was playing and talking about doing his coaching badges, was a lot of the black guys said, well, what's the point? I'm not going to get a job. Yeah. There's no point in doing it. You know, and I totally and utterly get that. It must be a horrendous feeling as a player to know, kind of like when you hang up your boots, your opportunities are far more limited than what someone who's equally or lesser qualified is, based at least in part on skin colour.
Yeah, it is. You know, it is. And, you know, has it changed? Has it changed? I don't think it has. You know, I think we say the right things, we don't do the right things. You know, because ultimately, as I said, if there's more people that have been called out for racism being managers in Scotland than there is black or ethnic managers and coaches, then there's an issue. You know, we're talking about it, and that's where I always see, if you're talking about something, it tends to be an issue. You know, we look at how the women's games changed and how women are coming into broadcasting, which is fantastic. You know, that there was an issue. That's why we were talking about it, and that's why it's changed. You know, so I ask the question: what are people scared of? Are putting a black man or a woman at the head of their team? And I think when you think about, even when you look at England, because there's been more black managers in England than there certainly has been in Scotland. How many of the black managers get another opportunity? When you think of white managers that fail, on a consistent basis, black managers fail once, they don't get another opportunity. And I think there's lots of issues we can talk about this, to the cows come home, really, and that'll still be going probably. I've been speaking about racism for near on 30 years, and do I think that anything's changed? I don't, because I don't think there's anybody willing to put their head above the parapet at the power where the powers that be need to be and go, you know what, I'm going to change this on my watch. It's almost as if I don't want this in my watch. I'll just park it to the side, and then the next person that comes in, they can deal with it. And I think that's what happens. It's almost like a jack in a box. It gets put back in its box and then it bounces out again at some point, and then it gets put back in its box instead of actually dealing with it and going, you know what? Do we have a problem in Scottish football with racism? Yeah, we do. Because I think if you were to ask every black player in Scottish football from the Premier League down to the second division, if you ask every single black person, have you been racially abused in Scotland in football? I would say at least 95% would say yes.
You've kind of alluded to it there without saying in so many words, and we certainly won't stir controversy by talking about individuals, but there certainly seems to be a kind of divide between maybe an old guard that is still very much in control of certain aspects of senior management of Scottish football, and maybe the wider public consensus. If we can talk about a team without mentioning a person, when Ross County made a managerial appointment not too long ago, there was outcry about that.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you see that gap being bridged between the kind of public consensus and the people that can actually make a change? And further to that, what responsibility do clubs have to stamp these kind of attitudes out?
I think clubs have a huge responsibility on it. It's a societal problem as well as a footballing problem. I think we have to gain together, both society and football. Football has a huge platform. It's got a platform bigger than any other sport in Scotland and in the UK and probably worldwide. If we're not willing to make a stand on it, then we're still going to be here in 30 years' time. And people are either for change, or they're not. It's simple. You have to make it. You have to want to change. If you don't want to change, then you're part of the problem, because this isn't about black and white people, or black and ethnic minorities trying to overthrow the white dictatorship. It's not about that. Black people have been marginalised for hundreds of years. At the end of the day, all that me as Kevin Harper is asking, that people, black and ethnic minorities, get equal opportunities. That's all. I'm not asking for a job because I'm black. I'm asking for an equal opportunity. And black and ethnic minorities, whether you like it or not, don't get equal opportunity.
Just to sort of round off on this, Kevin, I think one of the things that I kind of wonder about is a lot of it, certainly in the football sphere, but probably societally as well, is a lot of it's subconscious. And I'm just thinking, for example, when we talk about black players, there's a very set vocabulary about black players. They've got a language style. They're laid back. They're, relaxed. It's almost an implication, sort of like almost laziness is,
yeah.
And you see it in sports reporting all the time, and I think even as fans we can be guilty of it. It's something that is said, and oftentimes it's justified. I mean, someone like Effie Ambrose is laid back on a football park. They're talking away from it, but I'm going to suggest if a white player had the same style as Effie Ambrose, it might not be the same vocabulary that's used to describe him. Do you think that kind of subconscious bias, if you like, plays a big part as well?
I think there's subconscious bias. I think there's institutional racism as well. I think when you, for instance, there's been many a times where I've been standing going to go into the bank, or get cash out the hole in the wall, and there's been somebody in front of me, and they've looked behind, saw that a black man saw me as a black man stand behind and brought their bag in a little bit closer to them, and things like that. That's subconscious, because what history is projected or perceived that a black person is, and I think you look at what's been happening in England. That I know there was how the press worded, what Raheem Sterling, his house, and what his teammate Phil Foden was, and how they worded it so differently, more derogatory to Raheem Sterling than Phil Foden. So I think we have to be careful, is that in society of how we say things and how we portray things. At the end of the day, we're all equal. We should be all equal, but unfortunately, that's not. Black and ethnic players have to work harder than white players to get that opportunity. Black and ethnic coaches have to work even harder to get that opportunity. And if they get the opportunity and they aren't successful, or they are successful, and they have to work even harder to get that next opportunity. And that's the way football is. Is it right? I don't believe it's right. No, it's not right. Do we have to change it? Yeah, we do. And I think when you look at the English FA and you look at the LMA and what they're doing, the player to coach scheme, black players going in and being around football clubs, and there's many different things that they're doing, and you hear of this, and, the SFA and the SPFL, I don't know what they're doing. I'm not privy to what they're doing. They might have some amazing thing that they're doing, but as far as I'm aware, they're not doing anything. But at the end of the day, as I say, and I made this point, the English FA are doing the player to coach scheme, and the big thing that people in Scotland will say, they've got more sponsorship than us. Yeah, that's right, they have. But if the SFA went to their sponsors, went to BT, went to Adidas and said, would you sponsor 2 or 3 black players or ex-players that we are going to put through this pathway of player to coach, so that we can see that there's an opportunity, so that black players can see there's an opportunity for black players to get into teams, and we need 100 grand, just for talking sake, 30 grand a year for 3 players. They're not trying to tell me BT and Adidas wouldn't go, you know what, that's a great initiative, we'll sponsor you that.
Kevin, thank you so much for giving so much of your time to us tonight. We'll leave off with one last question, hopefully a more optimistic one, certainly. But we really appreciate your openness and candidness in talking about these issues, because there's no way around it, and there certainly shouldn't be. And we look forward to you being unapologetic in the future and talking about all issues, as you should be too. We just wanted to end off on rolling out the red carpet to you, talking about what your future prospects are, what you're looking to achieve in the near future, and what does it look like for Kevin Harper going forward?
I think for me it's about coaching football, trying to make a difference first and foremost, trying to be a role model for other kids that are out there that are black or underprivileged as I was, that they know that there is someone there that has done it and we can do it. My door's always open. My messages are always open. So for me, I think it's about really enjoying football, and hopefully at some point getting back into management or coaching, of some capacity, because I genuinely believe that I've got a lot to give, and I think I've proved that when I was at Albion Rovers. I wish I was at Man U, but Albion Rovers, there's just a slight difference. But that's for Kevin Harper. That's what it's about. It's about growing the management, the sports management company, so that we can get players and we can help them, look after their future, most importantly, and give them the guidance and the understanding of 13 years in the game.
thanks very much again to Kevin for joining us there. Some really interesting points that he made. A lot of things I think we expected from him, but it doesn't make them any less worth hearing, in my opinion. I thought he speaks very openly, clearly very passionate about what he's got to say, and he actually seems to be proposing some solutions to a problem as well, rather than just listing problems, which I think anyone can do.
Yeah, I think Kevin is potentially one of the most underrated voices in Scottish football at the moment. He's always very proactive in getting involved in fans media as well as conventional media, and talking about his sort of lived experience, and as you say, offering real fundamental solutions to real problems that sometimes people aren't able to offer up. And yeah, I'd like to thank Kevin obviously for giving us a good chunk of his time and for providing so much honesty and insight. I think these kind of interviews are a dream because if you give Kevin a topic, he's someone who can just talk on it, and actually for us it makes it very easy.
Yeah, so I think that brings us to the end of this episode. So thanks very much again for the discussion, Gav. Really enjoyable as always. And yeah, just again another huge thanks to Kevin Harper for taking the time.